It is Monday on Daily Delivery. Patrick Reusse joins me. I am your host, Michael Rand. Got a lot to get to, Patrick. Not a huge weekend of actual, sports on the playing surfaces. NBA All-Star Game, if you're into that sort of thing. I'm not. Patrick, I got a feeling you're not either. But we still got plenty to get to nonetheless. Patrick, I want to get through a couple of the columns you wrote last week about the Vikings, including top 10 coaches in Vikings history. I guess top 9, and then Kevin O'Connell, wherever he slots in as number 10 eventually. And also your thoughts from his introductory news conference on Thursday. I think we got to get to 3 own goals in one game, but we'll get to that in a minute. I think the story of what became kind of the story of the weekend outside of NBA All-Star festivities, Cat winning the 3-point contest, which was kind of fun for the local fans, was the handshake line at the Wisconsin-Michigan game turns violent when Juwan Howard, strikes. I don't know, it wasn't quite a punch, but he certainly hit Wisconsin's assistant coach, Krabanoff. Yeah. When I was kind of seeing it on social media first and kind of seeing how everyone framed it, then I watched and I was like, wow, he got him he popped him pretty good. And you see why there was the timeout and then you see the confrontation, but that is some ugliness in the handshake line.
Yeah. The NBA, I mean, not the NBA, the Big Ten, the Warren is going to act decisively, although I'm sure this is a stand for him to stand up and draw attention to himself, and there's nothing he likes better than that, Kevin Warren. So he'll make some dramatic thing. I don't think Wisconsin's going to go unpunished by this either.
No,
Gard. You look at it, it's hard to tell who stopped who. A lot of people's interpretation is Howard was going to walk by him. And then Gard said something, and then Howard used that as an opportunity to go goofy. But all the videos we're seeing now are on, the Howard end of it. What is not getting as much attention as what happened with all the players. There was a lot of punches being thrown and stuff, crazy stuff going on, and there are going to be some players suspended too. I don't think our buddy Brad Davison was involved, which is a surprise. But I think the Gophers isn't Wisconsin the next foe here at Williams Arena? Isn't it? I think they're here Wednesday.
That's quite possible. So that they could be a little shorthanded.
Yeah, they could. I bet Gard won't be coaching; somebody else will. But Howard's going to end up getting suspended for probably through the Big Ten tournament or something, at least through the end of the season. I think they got 3 games left. And because they won't want that to be the big story at the tournament, I bet he gets suspended for the tournament too.
Maybe.
And they're iffy for getting into the NCAA field too. I think they're only about 14-11. The season in general has been a big flop for them. And I don't think this guy loses well. Then he had some kind of a dust up last year in the Big Ten tournament too when they got beat, didn't he?
Yeah, it's the Ohio State coach that he doesn't like? Is there like a rivalry there or something like that? I feel like there's something where they've got something going. And yes, you are correct. The Gophers play the Badgers on Wednesday, so that would be interesting too.
Yes, yeah, but it's they will. I'm sure they'll be announcing a verdict here today. But troubled times for Michigan. No, Harbaugh, flirting with the Vikings, and then they got to try to figure out, how to schmooze that thing and make him, committed to Michigan, and he got a new contract.
Yeah, were you as shocked as I was at that, Patrick, that he got a new contract out of it all?
That was. There were people. See, I really thought he probably wanted to leave college and go to the NFL.
Sure.
But there were other people saying, nope, he's just trying to get a new contract out of Michigan. And if that was his goal, he succeeded. He was trying to recover some of the money he was forced to give back to them, which, don't you think originally that was idiotic of Michigan to let it be known that the guy's renegotiated his contract. You know, you can say he's lowered his buyout or stuff, but
Sure.
hey, we got to take some of his money away from him too. I don't think that's very good PR.
No.
That puts the whole thing in jeopardy. That puts more pressure on him. I mean, they bounced back and had a great year, but and beat Ohio State. But Wade Emanuel is having his problems over there as the athletic director, and this thing is feeding right into the new type of media. I was in the car when it was being talked about on ESPN radio last night, and oh man, they couldn't pontificate more. It's great to pontificate and how our game doesn't need this. It's not your game. You're watching the game just like the rest of us. It's not your game. You're not the protectorate of the game. And I mean, we can say, boy, that didn't look good, but all this pompous, boy, am I offended by this stuff. Driving me crazy. We'll see how it play out. Nobody got hurt.
Yeah.
And this Krabenhoff, I think, is kind of a punk anyway, from what I understand. So, his father is one of Denny Sanford's right-hand man. He doesn't run the company anymore, but he did. But one of the reasons Augustana was trying to go to D1, they're going to do it in hockey, but do it in everything. Supposedly was because the old man wanted Augustana to be a D1 program so they could hire the kid as the D1 coach at Augustana. So,
jeez, that's a lot of work to get your kid a D1 job. Well,
they got a lot of money now.
I guess.
And they giving away Denny's money. They might as well get themselves a D1 basketball program. But
that's amazing.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
You know what? This is a kind of a void. We're past the Super Bowl here, and we're past coaching hirings and firings, and we don't have baseball.
Olympics just ended.
This is a great time to spend 72 hours being outraged because some basketball players and the coaches got a little tiff. But I said to you before we came on, I truly believe this. This is another downside of sportsmanship. We don't have to be shaking hands. Just the NBA's got it figured out. The two coaches give each other a little howdy do, and maybe a couple of guys who played with each other before will go out and hug in the middle of we don't need the handshake line. Let's get rid of the handshake line in all sports. Use it after the 7th game of the Stanley Cup and maybe the state championship games. And that's it. We don't need it when Fulda's playing Slayton now. We don't need the damn handshake line down there. Get rid of the handshake line, and we wouldn't have these problems.
So the sportsmanship is the problem.
Sportsmanship is overrated. That's what I tell you.
It's forcing people to like each other after they just went at each other for a while.
I mean, it's fine. Sportsmanship's why you're competing. Yes, but don't take cheap shots and all that stuff. But this idea that we're going to shake hands with each other to show, how much we enjoyed the competition is just it's a formula for trouble. That's what it is. So, and if you're a bad sport and you're a kid on a high school team and you are crushed by a defeat, you should be able to walk off if you want to and not participate in the handshake line without everybody being upset. Too many handshakes in sports. That's my theory.
Yes. Well, I can buy that. I don't, they also shouldn't probably be taking swings at each other, but you put people in you put them in a volatile situation, right after that. And that would have been defused by just everybody walk to the locker room, and then 10 minutes later, you probably forget about the fact that you're mad that they called a timeout with 15 seconds left.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's the moment you're looking for something to be offended at beyond your team right then, right? You got to be upset the way your team played and faded down the stretch, and so you're looking for something else to be upset about. I don't think Juwan's a good loser. And,
No.
That's what we ran into here. So,
And he's
by the way,
getting some opportunities this year. What?
One other college basketball note: Tim Miles,
I saw that.
San Jose State got his first victory in the Mountain West. I mean, he was out there previously with Colorado State,
Yes.
but first victory after 0-14. Beat Richie's team yesterday and beat him bad in the second half. I was reading the Albuquerque paper, and this before we went on. You think we were mean to Richie here?
No.
Him, man. Yeah, it was the game story saying how they embarrassed themselves. It was pretty good. So
I'll have to go look at that.
Yeah, he was not happy with Richie. So Richard's performance there. Apparently, they had allowed this feisty San Jose State team to shoot 71% in the second half.
Oh, that's that vintage Patino defense right there.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
Patrick, I want to get to a couple of your Vikings columns from last week, including the one that you wrote after the Kevin O'Connell introductory news conference, where you had some observations. You also talked to Bud Grant, legendary Vikings coach, who, by the way, do you see a physical similarity between O'Connell and Grant? Because every time I look at O'Connell, I see a little bit of Bud Grant for some reason. I don't know if it's the eyes, what it is, but there's something about the two of them that makes me think they look like each other.
Yeah, I would have to really, well, except when Bud was that age, Bud was one of those guys like Sparky Anderson and some other guys who looked the same at 38 as they did at 68.
Sure.
They got the gray hair early and they aged early. Now this kid looks like he could, still play quarterback, but I think the tallness, tallness of the situation. And, I use this in the column, and it's a famous, my favorite thing about Bud really is the favorite little anecdote about Bud is when Jim Finks the general manager told Bill McGrain, his PR guy, used to be a great sports writer at the Tribune, to go out to the airport and pick up Bud. And McGrain didn't know him, because McGrain wasn't here when Bud was in town. And he says, "How will I know it's him?" And he said, "Look for the guy who looks like the town marshal."
That's about right.
And that's the legend. And Bud always had that look. It's funny how, and I think this happens to most sports guys. Bud was so cautious with his words.
Yes.
Back in the day, when he coached and everything. Now, you can sit and talk to him forever. And he's got story. I mean, I'm sitting there talking to him, and I use these two stories Sunday. I didn't know, I'd forgotten one of these things, and I didn't ever know the other one, that he was almost on that flight when Calvin Jones hit the mountain at the plane that coming out of Vancouver where they had their first All-Star game. He got a call right when he was leaving the hotel to go out for breakfast and said, "We can get you on the morning flight." So he and four other guys from Winnipeg got on the morning flight. Calvin Jones slept in, and that plane that left late in the afternoon ran into a mountain, and all 62 of them got killed. So Bud, and like a week later, they named him as the 29-year-old head coach. He went from being an all-star player to in Canada to being the head coach of the Blue Bombers at age 29. And then he intercepted 5 passes in a playoff game up there.
What?
And he says he intercepted 5 passes in a playoff game up there. And I looked it up, and it wasn't wasn't a bad memory. It's true. In 1953, and that's got to be a world record for a playoff game in either the U.S. or Canada, right?
Yeah, 5 interceptions. That's
5, and he was better known as a receiver, but he also had played two ways back then, and he said that he usually played cornerback, but he told the coach that he should play safety because he could read Frank Filchak's eyes, the quarterback. So he intercepted 5 passes.
They didn't throw it more than 5 times most games back then. Jeez.
And now I should point this out too. This is a little more Frank Filchak information people need. But when I looked up Frank Filchak, he got suspended from the NFL for 4 years for throwing games.
So man.
So maybe he was just throwing it to putt on purpose. I don't know. So anyway, it's amazing. I've said one thing about the pandemic, and which we're coming out of now, thank God, I think. But and things are getting normal, but I've never gone down rabbit holes for no reason more than in my life, just because there's nothing else going on. You start looking at stuff, and now I'm a scholar on Frank Filchak. I can tell you that never would have happened previously. So anyway.
That's amazing. Well, the column itself was interesting too, just because I don't know if I'd ever heard Bud talk about Kirk Cousins before, and you quoted him extensively talking about Kirk Cousins. Let me just read it really quick for those who might not have read it. You got Bud talking about Kirk Cousins later on in the story here, just kind of in the context of what O'Connell had been saying about him and things like that. You got Cousins was very good too, and I'd take him. This is comparing him to Stafford. You know why? He plays. He has the most important ability, durability, and that's a Budism right there. There's nothing better than when preparing for a season, for a game, than knowing you're going to have the same quarterback every week. That's why we won so many games in the 70s. We had Fran Tarkenton. He got hurt once late in his career, but when he came back to the Vikings in 1972, we knew what we would have at quarterback every week. Tarkenton was an all-time great, retired with the NFL passing records at the time. He said, Cousins is good. As a coach, I'd be more than happy to go into a season with him because I'd know he was going to be there for us every week. COVID willing.
And I got to say, that was Bud offering that up. I hadn't asked about Cousins. Bud brought up that Mark Craig asked the question about comparing Stafford to Cousins. And Bud basically was saying he thinks Cousins, Stafford is like the last 6 years has missed 3 games too. He got hurt a little early in his career. But Bud thinks that Stafford should be compared to Cousins than the other way around. But that's, the fact that Stafford won a Super Bowl is the reason we all have this new view of him. But Bud likes him. He thinks he's a very accurate thrower, and if the offense is properly designed, that he'll be a good year for him. It really is though, Mike. I think we're all sitting here. We still have Rick Spielman aftershock, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that they're telling us, Adolfo Mensa, and they're telling us how much they like Kirk, but Rick would be telling us the same thing right now if he still had a job, right? So you never know when they're lying to you or not. But the story is out that Cousins is not interested in taking any kind of a pay cut. So if you do redo the contract, you're still going to be paying him at an extremely high level, just over a longer period of time. And I don't think that should surprise anybody, right? I mean, the number one thing he and his agent wanted to do when they first signed here was get everything guaranteed. So he's not giving up any money, but that certainly. I would imagine if you're a fan, you get a little sick of hearing about it, right? Because it's beat to death in the media. We're all beating it to death. But that's the number one angle with the new coaching operation is Cousins the guy or not, right? Because you got $45 million sitting there on your cap that you got to figure something out with.
I wonder if they'll just let him play it out. I didn't think that was ever going to be. Like, of all the options, the 3 big options, a couple months ago, I didn't think that was a palatable one, but you do just kind of wonder if they'll see how it goes this year and just kind of play it out, kind of like what Washington did when they franchised him a couple times and then just said, nah, that's it. We'll take the pain this year.
You can't franchise him, but this is a lot different than when Washington was franchising him too. He was young then.
Yes,
right.
That's true.
And he had a big market. He's, I think you can play it out if you can figure out a way to suck up the $45 million. I would just play it out because you're still going to have a good chance to sign him, because I still don't believe there's going to be this red hot market for a 36-year-old quarterback unless he goes and wins a Super Bowl or something like that. But I mean, if you get rid of Hunter and you get rid of Barr and you get rid of those two tackles in the middle, right?
Yes.
You can figure it out, can't you? You could. I mean, the cap's going to go up some too, right?
Yeah,
so
it is. Cousins right now. Cousins is 33. He'll be 34 at the start of this upcoming season. But still, that's, he's pretty, for a durable quarterback. You could imagine him having 3 or 4 more pretty standard years for him. So I think he could. I don't think he'd get the same contract he got from the Vikings, but if he got to free agency again, he'd have some kind of market, at least, I would say.
Yeah, he'd have a market. I'm just saying you could bring him back if you wanted to. But here's the other deal. If you tie your wagon to him for 4 years to extend it out, I don't think you want to do that.
I don't think you do either.
I think you got to see more. And he's an annoying guy. Okay. He annoys me. He annoyed me when he first came here and he was arrogant. And he annoys me now when he tries not to be arrogant. He annoys me more because deep in his heart that what an arrogant guy he is. So, but I see no option better than him right now. There's nobody to draft. There's no great young quarterback. Deshaun Watson. Whoever came up with that rumor is
Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson did.
Yeah, you think you're going to bring Deshaun Watson to this town?
Yeah.
I mean,
no.
you gotta, bring him to. I don't know what market would accept him, but certainly not Minnesota. With an accused sexual predator, for God's sake. So it's that's not going to happen. I don't know, but it'll be interesting offseason. We got Wade Phillips's son, Bum Phillips's grandson. I love that. If he's got the personality of those two guys, that would be fun.
Yes.
The new offensive coordinator. I wonder how he got on the offensive side of the ball, that guy. Wes Phillips is his name. And, his dad seemed to be a good guy, and his old man's the funniest guy that ever lived.
Right.
He would, when he coached Houston and the other places. But so he must have some big personality. But we have, what do we have now? We got a quarterback coach. We got an assistant quarterback coach. We got an offensive coordinator. we got a passing game coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got a head coach. We got a head coach. When I was trying to put a litany of all the guys who could be in the meeting room, I forgot the passing game coordinator. Yeah. So you got a quarterback. You got a quarterback coach, an assistant quarterback coach, and a passing game coordinator. So the quarterbacks coaches are just handling the quarterbacks. They don't have anything to do with planning them. They just look at the fundamentals. But that was one thing Bud told me I didn't get into. He said, I don't know how they can stand to have all these coaches and drive me crazy. Yeah. Have all those guys. I don't know what they're saying to everybody. I don't want that many people talking to the players,
Yeah, I suppose.
But I wanted them to get this message that, I mean, obviously the world has changed incredibly, but do you really need 25, 30 coaches? I don't know. It's got to be a little convoluted to do it that way. I think Bud had the most he had was 6. And Buzz Birdies was basically in charge of finding bargains for Bud and the other coaches, that if they needed a refrigerator, Buzz would go out and get them a good deal on it, stuff like that. Buzz was just basically the guy who hustled things up, and they gave him some job, defensive backs or something. But they had 6 coaches, and including Buzz, who was you never had to pay retail if you worked with Buzz. So anyway.
I want to get to your list of coaches. I don't know where Kevin O'Connell's going to fit on
I
here.
know he won't be any lower than 9th.
That's right. That's a saving grace for any coach coming in here for the rest of history. You're not going to be last. You'd have to work extraordinarily hard to find yourself below Les Steckel.
Or less. 3-13 1 year less. The thing, and I mentioned this when I rated them, the thing about Les is those guys were bailing out on him the last month, man. They couldn't. There was no ailment too small that would prevent that they would not use to prevent them from playing. They wanted no more. They wanted no more part of Les.
Well, and that's the extraordinary thing, because that was very early in my football watching days, but it was just amazing to me because if you looked at that season, they started out 2-2, and their first 8 games, their first 10 games were pretty close. They got blown out in the opener, but then they lost by 2, won by 7, won by 1, lost by 8, lost by 4, lost by 3, lost by 2, lost by 9, won by 3. Then the last 6 games, lost by 28, lost by 21, lost by 31, lost by 14, lost by 44, and lost by 24. They definitely had enough.
I had never actually looked at those numbers. Those are amazing that they got in the NFL. It's hard to get beat that bad that often. So yeah, they just that's enough. Yeah, Les. Greg Wong, who served in the Army for a couple of years. He didn't go to Vietnam, but he was the beat guy in St. Paul, and he was doing an analysis. And one of the cheapest shots of all time he had in there. Les always tells us about all the men that he led into the jungle. He never tells us how many he let out. something like that. Not something you can get away with today.
That's pretty good line though.
Yeah, well, I on my list, I really felt that I kind of done it earlier. And then I started figuring it a little bit. And I'm always going to put Chile a little higher than people want, because Chile almost took us to the Super Bowl. And Chile wasn't that bad. Okay. They were 10-6 1 year, and then they were 12 and far. But, he ended up, whoever decided to bring Randy Moss in here. Yeah. And I think he was talked into it. I don't think he was really saying, get me Randy Moss. I think the ownership actually wanted. I think the Wilfs wanted him, and they needed to do something to punch up that season. But that's what ended up costing him his job, basically, is he got run in with Moss, and Moss started publicly bad-mouthing him, and that's what ended up costing him his job. So I put him a little higher. I put him tied with
you get him tied for 5th with Zimmer, which I think is about fair.
And the one that I don't like, that I have to put him down there that low, was Tice, because Tice was okay. Tice just didn't get any.
Support.
Yeah, you know what I think when I'm doing the list, you think they've had pretty good coaches here, right?
Yeah, I mean, in general,
Les Frazier was. He was kind of a non-entity, but the Peterson's big year. I guess we forget that his real bad year was that when Peterson got suspended. Probably
no, that was Zimmer's first year.
Oh, Zimmer's first year. Okay, so 2013. Yeah, that was just Christian Ponder getting worse. Christian Ponder was one of those rare quarterbacks that got worse.
Yes.
He just got worse and worse. But the top 2 aren't too hard to come up with.
Bud and Denny, yeah. How did Norm Van Brocklin get into your 3rd spot? I'm curious about that.
Because he came in here, and we were the the Vikings were secondary to the Gophers by a huge margin, right?
Sure.
We weren't that sure. The NFL was not what it is today, and the Vikings were not immediately popular. And by 64, they were 8-5-1. They were second in the NFC West, and which was then a 7-team division.
Right.
It was a 7-team division, and he really, as crazy as he was, he really had him on the rise. But then he came in, and I gave him credit for developing it, and creating a fan base. And he was a pretty sharp guy. I mean, I never dealt with him that much, but by all accounts, he was a pretty sharp guy until he got full of whiskey. And then then him and Klobuchar would be fighting with each other out at Jack's Supper Club in the mid-80s. Juwan, Howard, Greg Gard had nothing on those two guys,
right.
out at the bar. And it was a different world, obviously. But,
yes,
he came in. We were excited to have him. And the first 4 years, they kept getting better and better and better. And that's I kind of threw him in there to recall that, he was the first builder of a program here. And then he and Tarkington got cross swords. And 65, I've told this story 100 times, but, they had big optimism. They were doing mediocre to start the year, and then they lost one. I can't remember, like week 6 they lost one. They thought they should have won, and he went home and got full of whiskey and quit. Called in and the next morning and said he was quitting. And that became a big story in town. And that's the famous story for me. I'm a copy boy in there, and Charlie Johnson was the sports editor, executive sports editor, and Sid was the morning sports editor. And those two guys were standing right next to the little cubbyhole where I was sitting. And they couldn't have insulted Van Brocklin more. They both hated him because he was a very abusive guy when he got in a certain way. And then they both wrote columns begging him to come back the next day. And I said, what the hell is this? And he did. He came back the next day. He came back on Tuesday, but he never got the team back, after that. And then he got in the feud with Tarkington. And people, however, say that, Van Brocklin forced out Tarkington. Well, that's not true, because when Tarkington wrote an open letter in 67, in January 67, I believe it was. I think it was January, maybe late December. I don't know, but it came out that he'd written a letter. I want to leave the Vikings. I can't play with. He basically said he couldn't play with Van Brocklin because Van Brocklin had benched him for a game in Atlanta.
Which is hometown, yeah.
Hometown, yeah. And he wrote that letter. Well, Van Brocklin then quit. Van Brocklin quit after that.
Right.
And Fran did not rescind he wanted out of here. He wanted to go to some place like New York and become a bigger star. And it worked out perfect for him because he was there for 5 years with the Giants. They were mediocre, and then came back here in 72. They were 7-7 the first year, but then went to 3 Super Bowls. So it worked out for everybody but Van Brocklin. But the Van Brocklin went to Atlanta, and that one year the Vikings won their first 10, I think. The Van Brocklin beat them down in Atlanta.
Is that right?
It was a loss of the year somewhere in there. Yeah, some year. This is all. I think they won their first 10. They ended up, that was one of their 12-2 years, which they had all the time back in those days. So anyway, that's how I got him up to third. And he might be a little overrated, that's for sure. But I just think it's a historic place in the franchise. I gave him extra credit for that.
I got one more question.
When you're doing a list, you got to be a little controversial.
You do.
Yes. Right.
That was the one. Yeah. I'll read the rest of this quick. And I got one more question for you about it before we get to the own goals, and then we go. Jerry Burns 4, Zimmer and Childress tied for 5, Tice 7, Leslie Frazier 8, Les Steckel 9. That all looks pretty good to me when I think about it all. How did Jerry Burns get this thing turned around? Because they were really just kind of stumbling through the early mid part of the 80s, whether it was still Bud here or whether it was the Les Steckel year, and then Bud comes back. They're 7-9 that year. What did Burnsy do to get them turned around?
AC out there in the flat. Is the ball thrown in low? That isn't Snelker's fault.
They had some players, and I think that we hadn't made the Herschel Walker trade yet, right?
No, because that was 89, right?
They had some fairly young. They had some young players, and they just the 87 run, 86, I can't even remember what were they.
I don't think they were that good. I think they were like 7-9 again or something.
But
like
87, we keep forgetting that they were 8-7 that year back into the playoffs, but 3 of the losses were strike breakers.
Right. They were 8-4 with the
they made no attempt to put together a strike team. So they were actually 8-2 in real games. That was a really talented team. And I gave Burnsy all the credit in the world for that playoff run, because it would have been one of the great playoff runs in NFL history had they made it to the Super Bowl. Because New Orleans' first really good team.
Yes.
They just went down there and blew their doors off.
Yeah.
And then they get Joe Montana booed off the field in San Francisco at halftime. And then they damn near beat the great Washington team. So that would win the Super Bowl. So I give Burnsy extra credit for that run. And he was a sharp guy. The players liked playing for him. They knew he was, he doesn't come off as the sharpest guy ever, but he was offensively a really sharp guy, and he could really tell a football player, I think. And he loved football players. He, the gritty, and he loved those guys, and he just related to them pretty well. Then the Herschel Walker trade, they started losing their draft trade. He never wanted that trade.
No.
In fact, that's one thing Bud told me was he said, I was asking him about his relationship with Fakes and the GM. He said when I came down here from Winnipeg, it was with the understanding that I would decide the 53 player roster.
Okay.
You get me the 60, 70 players, that's fine. But I picked the team. And he said that he had a great relationship with Finks. Then he said Lynn was okay because Lynn had listen to you, and let you make the decisions. Yeah. He said the worst thing that happened to Burnsy, he said, I would have never let it happen, is the Herschel Walker trade. He said, I would have never let Lynn make that trade. And he said, and Jerry didn't want to make that trade, but Jerry didn't have the same understanding that Bud did, which was he could basically say, nope, I don't want him. So anyway, but Burnsy, that playoff run more than anything, but he could relate to it. I never met anybody who played for him who didn't love him. They as a character or whatever.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of chuckling in the back of the room when he's giving him one of his profanity-filled speeches.
The Schnelker rant,
or something. Anyway, he's he was just. The funny thing about him was he had the hardest to get along. Well, Denny's teams weren't easy to get along with either, but he had the hardest team to get along with, man. There's a lot of cranky guys on that team, and they all hated the media and to the most part. But we loved him. All the writers loved him. Just even he'd tell us, even when he'd tell us what a bunch of jackasses we were, we'd laugh at him. So I think the players probably had the same reaction to him.
Well, they went to the playoffs the next 2 years after the playoff run. After that run, they went 11-5 the year after that, 10-6. They won up another playoff game in there. So it was a pretty good 3-year run for sure for him. And you get 3 years in a row of making the playoffs here. That's have they done that since Denny? I dare say they have not. So
no, I don't think they have. Denny. Denny made it 8 out of 9.
Yeah, until the year it all fell apart, and then Tice made it once. Childress made it twice in a row.
Mhm.
Zimmer never made it twice in a row. Frazier made it once. So yeah,
Well, Zim at the end ends up what? Did he make it 4 times or 3?
Three in 8
Just
years.
8 years. Oof. Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's not enough in the modern NFL. That's not enough. There was really no excuse for not making the playoffs this year. They were, not making the top 7 with that roster. I know was not good, to say the least. Zim
tight bunch.
Zim and Spielman deserved their fate.
I agree. Let's end quick. U.S. beats New Zealand 5-0 in the She Believes Cup. 3 of the goals for the U.S., all 3 in the first half, own goals by the same New Zealand player, Michaela Moore. You could watch soccer for the next 1,000 years. I don't know if you'd ever see that again.
Oh, she's a defender. I looked her up. The goals, Mike, came in the 5th minute, the 6th minute. So there was 2 in the 2, and then in the 36th minute.
Yes.
So, but they were the first 3 of the game.
Yes.
The U.S. is probably saying, "Come on, let us score one."
Pass it to Michaela.
Let us score one ourselves.
Yeah.
She just kept getting her foot in the wrong place, I guess, when she's trying to play the ball. But I've never seen anything like that.
No, that's awful. I feel terrible for that for her. It's just, I mean, occasionally that happens in soccer, right? You're defending a cross or something like that, and then you try to head it out of bounds to safety and end up heading it in the net, or it deflects off you, but
hits you in a body part by accident.
3 of them in that same half in a pretty big stage. It's just that's terrible.
They finally pulled her after 40 minutes. They pulled her. The
Mercy.
coach must have been the first stoppage after. She didn't want to pull her right after the 3rd one. She went stoppage to pull her out, but the poor. I hope she can. I mean, let's face it. New Zealand is not a women's soccer power. I hope she can, get on with her life here.
Yes, I hope so too.
But she is, but when she passes from this veil of tears, the poor girl, it's going to be, 40 years from now. Michaela Moore, who scored 3 own goals, the obit,
right,
passed away at age 93.
First line of the obit. That's not not what you want. Not what you want.
You always kind of wonder what that's going to say. You kind of hope your relatives write it for you instead of neutral sources. So.
All right, Patrick. Well,
all right, Olympics.
Good stuff.
The Olympics. It's got to be the biggest dud Olympics of all time.
Yeah.
When your number one story is a cheating 15-year-old Russian, it's not too good. How about the Russian coach? How do you like her, Frau Blucher?
Yeah,
chewing her out after she fell down. God Almighty! I hope Putin doesn't attack Finland because they beat him in the hockey game. For God's sake. So anyway. That's the highlight of the Olympics for me is Finland beating the Russians in the hockey finals. Finland's first gold medal. I saw them lose to Sweden in the first shootout.
Really?
For the gold medal in Lillehammer. They played Sweden and they lost in overtime. In that game to the Swedes. So I remember that one. So. Anyhow, I had more fun in Lillehammer than I think anybody had in Beijing.
I think that's probably accurate. Hopefully the next Olympics are a little bit more normal-ish than the last 2 have been. All right, sir. Good stuff. Right. Appreciate it. We'll do it again next week.
We'll have more to talk about next week.
You know what?
We'll have more.
We had plenty. We always have plenty to talk about. It just depends on what it is.
Okay.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right.
Bye-bye.
Yep.